Hi everyone, I'm Scott Schneider. This is Stereo Niche. Hey, this week we're going to talk about some Sansui separates. Stick around. All right, so let's talk about some separates from Sansui. And in this case, it's the AU-7700 and the TU-7700. And these were manufactured from 1974 until 1976. Now the amplifier, the integrated amp, retailed for just at $400. But the tuner was not really that much cheaper. It retailed for, I think it was $330 at the time, which seems pretty substantial. In my mind, later on, tuners became much less expensive as the years went on than amplifiers. So I was kind of surprised that they were sort of so close together. Now, these are earlier in the series. I think most of my units are from around the 76 and forward time frame. So this was that sort of era that things were, when you would look at the fit and finish on these, they were very rugged. Everything about these feels like it's from the 60s where that durability was there. Things were all metal and there were no cutting corners. Everything was sort of just made to last in a way that it just is hard to comprehend, in a way that all this detail was put into them. Not that the later models cut any corners, but these were, I'll say, a little more rugged feeling in the way that I guess, and I'll mention this again probably later, but it just doesn't feel as refined. It seemed that our manufacturing capability improved later on, where I guess where those tolerances were just much tighter later on. It seems that manufacturing capability was more refined, and during this time it was just preceding that. But they're extremely nice units. I will say they do feel a little older, whereas when you have the look and feel of, say, the X19 series, it just feels like it's a little more modern. These feel, to me, a little more dated than that series. But still great nonetheless. I still love the look of these units. I bought these from someone who picked them up. I think they were not from the original owner. And gosh, I recall it was a late night and must have been winter time because it was dark fairly early. And I drove to this home and these units were in the separate garage. And I remembered them being set up in the back of the garage. And going in, again, complete blackness everywhere except the garage itself was lit up. And there they were sitting and they were just turned on, no speakers or anything. And I just bought them hoping that they would work. And they did. They worked just fine. But still one of those times where I didn't get to really set them up or take a listen. I just sort of had to buy them based on the person selling them, their word that they actually worked. But I've had them since this was around 2010 or so. So I've had them quite a long time. Actually, it's one of the very first systems that I bought. I'll say separates. Up to this point, I sort of mostly bought receivers and speakers, but I hadn't really bought too many separates. So I was quite excited to pick them up because at that time, again, I just hadn't really run across too many separates, and so I was very enthusiastic about them. And I had them set up in my office for a good while, and I think I can't remember. I think I had them paired with some Advents maybe for a good period of time, and maybe some small KLH that I had early on, perhaps. But anyway, I enjoyed them in my office for a good bit of time, and then had them in here on display for quite a while. So I thought I would bring them out and then let you take a look at them. We're going to go through the features, but before we do, let's take up some close-up shots so you can get an idea of how nice they look. All right, so let's get a little up close and personal with the AU-7700 and the TU-7700. So I thought I'd bring you in a little bit closer. So again, these were sold and manufactured from around 74 to 76, so right in the middle of the 70s here. Now, the TU-7700, it's 54 watts, and first I want to talk about the sizing of it. It is about the same size as the AU-555A. It's in that ballpark. The next series that came along was the X19 series, and the 719, the chassis, a little bit bigger, it's a little bit taller, a little more substantial, I would say. And then, of course, it is quite different from the professional line, which is that AU-9900, the AU-20000. You know, those are extremely substantial compared to this. The AU-20000, for example, is twice the weight of this one and significantly deeper and quite a bit taller. So, you know, in the magnitude of size, this is on the lower end side of, you know, sizing for an amplifier, but probably very similar to most of them of that time frame. Now, I'm showing it, and because I have the matching combo here, but I am showing it with the TU-7700 tuner. I will say that compared to the other tuners, the X19 series, for example, it's a lot less refined, I will say. That doesn't have the smoothness of the tuning dial. It has some great features, but it's just definitely not as refined as the X19 series. So I would, if you're needing a tuner, I would absolutely recommend looking for one of those. The TU-519, even the TU-219, I think most would be a little more appreciative of those. They're just, again, a little more refined than this particular tuner. The amplifier, very nice. Again, so it has a plethora of features, which I'll walk through in a bit, but it doesn't have, again, a little bit of the refinedness that the X19 has. The AU-719, 717, just a little bit better, a little more improvement, I think, in some of the fit and finish. But again, extremely well built. It's very solid. Everything is all metal here. When you're clicking things, very solidly built, and you feel that throughout. So when they put this together, they actually absolutely put all kind of features into this unit, and it really scores quite well when you add up, you know, all the different features. So let's walk through those a little bit. Starting off with the speaker selector, you get two sets of speakers here. It has A, B, and it has A plus B. So you can play two sets of speakers simultaneously. The only caveat, like most of the amplifiers of this era, is that they have to at least be 8 ohms or more. So you need to be wary of that. It will play a single set of 4 ohm speakers, so it does have 4 ohm capability. So that's a great feature. Now moving on over to the right just a little bit, all this section here is tone and filter control. So you get lots of control over the sound and tweak it pretty much to your heart's desire. So right in the middle here, this switch, first you need to determine, do you even want to have tone control? So you have a tone defeat switch here. You can set it for just filtering only, so you can filter the high and lows, or you can have it for tone and filters together. So you can, of course, if you don't want your filters in operation, you can leave them out and then just use the tone side. But for the setting of the tone, when you start using your bass and your treble, you need to determine what frequency you want to affect. So it gives you some more detailed control here. You select your frequency for bass and your treble, and then once you selected those, you can then go up and manipulate that with the tuning dial here, and either add to it or take away from it. Mid-range is locked in at a certain mid-range frequency, and you can either add or defeat some of that as well. Moving on, you've got your volume control here, very nice, fairly large, and that's one thing I like about some of the integrated amps, is making sure, to me the volume needs to needs to be a little larger. It needs to be very quickly understood that this is the main control for the volume. You know exactly where to go. I don't tend to like those when the volume control knob is the same size as everything else. I just prefer, you know, it's a preference of mine to have it larger and more distinctive. Behind it, it's a dual control. That's where your balance is controlled. It's back here, so it's a dual switch. Moving up, you've got lots of functions here for tape play. For the most part, I typically never talk about it, but cassette usage is sort of getting a lot of more attention currently, so this might become more useful. You've got multiple selections here for making copies, etc. But most of the time, most of us, if you're not using a cassette, will leave it into source for your selections here on the right. So you've got two phonos, phono 1 and phono 2. On phono 1, you actually in the back have the ability to do some impedance matching. So if you happen to have a cartridge that needs a little bit more closer matching on the impedance, you have some options back there to select that. Default is 50K. For phono 2, there isn't that additional frequent impedance matching, so it's locked at 50K. After that, you've got a tuner selection and then two auxiliaries. Most of the time you only get one, so you get two here. So that's a great additional feature. So you can add some more sources, probably enough for most people. Moving down, you've got a few more options here. We've got a loudness switch. You can do low boost or you can do high and low, which is kind of uncommon. You usually have just boost, loudness on or off, and that's it. You get boost up the high and low range, but here you get to select either low or both. You got a muting switch as well, either out or you've got 15 decibels or 30 decibels, so very nice to have muting. And then lastly, something that we don't really use much anymore, but you have your normal stereo mode. You can reverse that if you feel the need to do that, and then you have mono. So most of the time it's either stereo or mono. So in this case, you get the benefit of having also reverse. So it's feature rich, a lot going on here for this integrated amp, and scores really well. It's got sort of all sorts of features to it. And for most of us, this is a great little amp to have. 54 watts, plenty of wattage for most speakers. Probably not something, if you have mostly 4-ohm speakers, of course, maybe not the best selection for that. You might want something a little more robust, especially if you're going to play more than one set of speakers. But for most of us and most, I'll say, not high demanding speakers would work just great. So that's the AU-7700. All right, so I ran through the features, but I didn't put the numbers down for you. So let's run through that so you can see where does this score on the features list. So starting off with the power, I said it had 54 watts, and for that it gets 15 points. Does have 4-ohm capability, so it gets 30 points for that. Has two phono capabilities here, both MM, so it gets 20 points for that. No MC functionality. On to auxiliary and other inputs, it has 5 more when you include the tape inputs, so it gets 50 points. Has balance, 5 points for that. Volume muting decibel feature, so it gets 10 points for that. Loudness switch, which was actually a little more featured than most, but gets 5 points. Tone controls, has defeat, has a lot more than typically that you get here, so gets the full suite for defeat, bass, mid, treble. Also has high-low filters, again more functionality than normal, but gets 10 points. Moving on, doesn't have power meters, but does have the ability on the back to defeat or separate, I'll say, the pre and the amp. Sometimes you have, or most of the times you have the little connectors, the little metal connectors that you connect. In this case, it's a switch. So you can either separate it via the switch, and if you do, then you have access. There's RCA connections for hooking it up separately. So 20 points for that feature. No wood case, of course. It has this nice metal cabinet to it. On the AC plugs, it has one switched, two unswitched, so 10 points each for those features. And then number of speakers. You can hook up 2 sets of speakers, so 20 points for that. All totaled up, 230 points, which honestly was a little surprised. I going in before I sort of sat down and put it on paper, I kind of thought it would be just around 200. So again, it does have quite a number of features here that goes, even though it's full featured, it even goes more because you get additional things like additional loudness functionality, additional filtering, those sorts of things that you don't normally get. So if I were to maybe, account for that, it would be higher, but I can't do that because it's not a standard way I've set up the metrics here. But 230 points, I was, pleasantly surprised that it did so well. Well, there you go, the Sansui AU-7700 and the matching tuner. This was, as I recall, it may not have been exactly this particular model, but before I started buying and collecting vintage audio, I had to start somewhere and I had to get the idea. And I recall looking online, and it was just about that time I started becoming aware that I wanted some kind of vintage system, and I was reading and absorbing everything I could. And I remember seeing a picture of someone's stereo. They had this cabinet, and in the bottom of the cabinet they had this integrated amp, and it was a Sansui amp of this time frame. And I remember thinking, wow, that is just so cool looking. And it is the system that sort of got me going in a feverish way of finally buying my first system. But I recall that experience very well. So if you like this video and you don't want to miss the next one, hit subscribe, do it now. If you want to make sure you get notified, hit that bell. And if you like this video, give us a thumbs up, because that really helps in the long run, helps generate some traffic and awareness. And as always, thank you guys so much for tuning in, and we'll see you next time.